So let's start. The topic for today's discussion is cultural intelligence, your business new currency. So since we live in a world where business are managed globally, and we need to have an inclusive mindset to handle all different types of culture. So different firms have different way of grooming their own culture, and some of the firms strongly believe that the cultural quotient is supposed to be their big asset, and it comes as a great competitive advantage, and we need to discuss about that.
Thanks. So CI or probably CQ, so these were the terms that came up way back in 2003 by probably some of the guys in the LBS, and and that was the start of the globalization in the world also. And and as we work with people with different kind of backgrounds and cultures and also the nationalities, what we actually realize is that one of the short way to have some success in this kind of global world is that we are able to understand and appreciate and have an understanding of the various kind of cultures, and then we should be able to appreciate that. And the purpose of the discussion that we are having today is that is CI or CQ relevant right now? What is the kind of relevance we see for that in the corporate world? And what are the things we can do to actually kind of adapt to that? And and I would just want to start with an example, and then we can probably kind of take a discussion forward. So I used to work for an American company for 7-8 years. I used to work for Citibank. Then I worked for Barclays for 4-5 years, and that was a Brit bank. And then I worked for the Japs for 10 years. The kind of things which are important for an American or the kind of stuff that is relevant for a Japanese are very, very different from each other. So when you deal with different kind of nationalities and cultures, what you actually realize is that that maybe there is stuff that is actually relevant for one part of the community or one part of the culture and is not relevant for the others. And there are and also there are things which are important for some and not for others. So like probably the best way to piss off a Japanese is to be not on time. Because these guys are supposed to be very, very punctual. And that is their culture, that they have always been like that. And after the World War II, the way that, after the World War II, that they have actually built the country. So the ethos of discipline, punctuality are very, very ingrained into them. And if you want to get respect from a Japanese, or if you want to get credibility from a Japanese, the best way is to be very, very disciplined and punctual, and that is very different from an Indian or a Brit or an American. So I think as we actually live in this global world, it is very, very important to understand the cultural ethics of all these cultures and nations and people, and then and then we should be able to appreciate that, because otherwise it will be very, very difficult to work in that kind of an ecosystem. So that is the background of the discussion, and I would open up the discussion for everybody to kind of have their thoughts on on what they think about CI and CQ, and then we can take it from there.
No, I agree, and I have experienced the same, because I provide, in my organization, we provide support from India to all the offices globally, and I see this. Like I will also continue the example of Japan. Like we are in a financial organization, correct? For a Japanese person, 1 cent difference in reconciliation is a big thing. Okay, he'll spend 4 hours. The American sitting on the other side, or a European, will say, "Why are you wasting 4 hours on 1 cent kind of stuff?" It's a culture. So if you don't understand what it is, then it's very difficult to deal with the different kind of people in the same group, because it is not about the 1 cent. It is about the culture they have, the perfection they want to do, and the pride they take in being those things. I can still remember one example when I was working about 20 years back with a Japanese IT company, and somebody was reviewing our document. That person gave us a report of like 10 pages on saying on page number 5 on line number 3, 1 full stop is missing. My response was, instead of writing this big complaint, why are you going to put the full stop there and finish it off, kind of. But this is how the perfect they want to be and do. And if our today's global world, if people are not sensitive to different cultures and different of their thing, it will be difficult to manage this stuff.
Yeah. So to me, I guess at a global level, as the world gets more and more globalized, obviously, cultural sensitivities and adapting to each other is critical. but 80% of our life gets spent in a corporate world within India, and hence the cultural nuances that I see in Indian environment is probably where I drive my performance, the interaction with our fellow colleagues and all, where the global cultural aspects are felt much lesser for an industry like ours. So yes, we do have a head office in Dubai. To that extent, the Emirati culture and the nuances are necessary, maybe for the top 10-20 people to appreciate, but not necessarily something you need to be perfect at. And I think over a period of time, I worked in the financial services space abroad and in India. I worked in the BPO KPO space for a while before I came into the completely localized industry called real estate. Over a period of time, cultural sensitivity has only improved. Empathy for each other's culture has gone up. Yeah. So if I start behaving like a Japanese, the Japanese better behave like me. Is a feeling which an Indian also starts getting. Yes. And particularly in the last 10 years, I think we see more of cultural sensitivity towards Indians from the globe. For the limited global travel that I do, I see a significant amount of cultural sensitivity towards us as well. So to me, in a corporate setup, which is fairly micro in comparison to the global setup, there are again multiple strands of culture. A culture of a finance function could be substantially different from a culture of HR function. A culture of a particular leader, given his upbringing, his background, his boss, his style, is so very different from the other. How do you bring a cohesiveness? How do you bring a consistency across the firm, and do you really want to bring, or do you want to leave it to its own? As long as the basic values are reflected in the day-to-day transaction between two people, between in the communication between, let's say, at a peer level or junior and subordinate, respect or trust or empathy or transparency or commitment to a deliverable. Those are the 5, 6, 7 things that at least I try to drive as a corporate DNA. And I define that as the culture. As far as, our culture is, we are honest, we are truthful, we are timely, we will be transparent with you, we will tell you the truth as it is. We will try to be as diplomatic as possible so the bad news doesn't hurt you as much, but it will still be delivered to you. Those are 5, 6 things let's keep on emphasizing and make sure that all of us live by those values. Yeah. To me, that is the micro culture which we drive at a corporate level, and ultimately corporate performance is dependent on that. ग्लोबल कल्चर जो होता है वो देखते हैं. मेरे को आज तक मतलब इन द लास्ट 10 years or so, I have not felt any serious obstacle interacting with a global counterpart who was disrespectful towards me or I was disrespectful towards things. I think it is over a period of time we mature and we settle at an average which is acceptable to both.
See, it is not also what respectful or disrespectful, it's also about understanding like what people will communicate and what they will not communicate. Correct. What is said and what is unsaid, and you have to understand the unsaid also, because a lot of cultures, a lot of people will not be very open about, correct? So that is there. Like in our culture in India, a lot of people will never ask questions to senior, but that is not what is expected in the Western culture. Like people want your people to be very open and all, and we keep emphasizing to our employees in our organization that don't be afraid, ask any question. If it's a stupid question, still ask. But in the Indian culture, a lot of people will, seeing a senior people around, they will not ask questions. They give that respect or something. But in the Western world, this is not okay. So everybody, so a lot of time I have to educate my Western colleagues saying that when you're asking, people are not asking questions, doesn't mean they don't have a questions. You need to get to that level to be comfortable that they ask you questions.
And it's not only about the countries.
Yeah.
So even if you look at India, so the kind of work ethics that you see in a Delhi are very different from what you see in Bombay. Is very different from what you see in Bangalore.
Yes.
So, so while we are talking about the Americans and Brits and Japanese and Chinese, Koreans, but even, even as a part of India, we actually see different kind of cultures.
Yes.
So I'll just give a slightly different twist to the whole aspect of culture. If you think, I think it's the smell of a place. You walk into an office and you can sense what's working, what's not working. Culture also, I strongly believe, is something that makes an organization successful consistently in different environments. So something that has stuck onto you in different challenges is something that keeps on getting nurtured and becoming more and more fundamental. I think that is what is culture, and it gets seriously affected by change in leadership in an organization. We've seen that leaders define the culture of the organization, and leaders through their own behaviors, through what they track and how they track, can influence shift in cultures. And if leaders, irrespective of whether it's a global organization or a local organization, anywhere, if a leader gets their head upon changing a few things, if there are other senior people or even sartraps, if you were to call them, come in the way of the new culture, those people move out to create space for new culture to set in. So I think leadership has a very important role to play. The stories that have helped the organization grow and sustain over a period of time have a strong role to play. And that is what sticks, and that is what goes deep into say this is what defines this organization. I think that for me is a much more irrespective of region, location. It's the nature of the business, it's the nature of the company, it's the nature of your competition, the context. A research organization fundamentally will have a very different culture, more cerebral. It's not chasing numbers and targets. It's more in terms of doing things in a certain way, right checks and balances, compared to an ITES kind of an organization which is at the other end of a bullwhip. Something changes in the market, but they are very nimble and flexible as a part of their culture. It's part of their ethos. It's built into their policies, processes, talent management practices, and these things add up to form a culture.
Yeah.
Right? It gets into the systems, processes of the organization of how work gets done. Otherwise, it's just words. But how does it get reflected on what's your leave policy? What's your travel policy? That defines the culture at a very fundamental, at a small level. We may not think too much about it. But that is what makes an organization successful over a long period of time when different vagaries have set in. That for me is culture. And the people who hold on to that help the organization grow, and they do well in that kind of an organization.
And also when a leader starts changing the culture or start building, it is a long process.
Yeah.
There's something which is very slow and it will be imbibed and people have to really start feeling it. It is not something you can go in and tomorrow or in 1 month you can do it, correct? This is, I would say, probably the longest thing which takes you to
there is a lot
really
of inertia and resistance.
Yeah.
No, but I've seen leaders try to do that.
Yeah.
And I've seen leaders try to do that. I'll not name because it's all being recorded, etc. But there are leaders who come, they say this is what we want, fall in line, or you fall out.
Yeah.
And then they change all the processes that come in the way of making sure that it happens. So there are projects which are run to speeden up things, to reduce bureaucracy. If somebody is not falling in line, those people move out. I've seen at least two such cases where people have
cultural realignment, is it?
Sorry?
Realigning the culture.
Cultural realignment, and anything that comes in the way, whether it is policies, processes, methods, people, everything is on the block.
Yeah. See, but there are ways to do it. Like, what is this way of doing it? Other is educating people, taking them along the journey of change, and maybe a little bit slow, but maybe more inclusive, more.
That's where the leadership and leadership style becomes important. There are some leaders which are in a hurry.
Yeah.
Right. And I can also tell you, sometimes leaders may not be in a hurry because they are in a hurry, but the market is changing so fast. You've been stuck on a certain way, you're completely out of sync. If you don't change at that pace at which the leader is trying to drive, you're anyway out. You're trying to claw back in. Yeah. So sometimes you have to push that agenda. And being an HR person, I think we have to then understand and then change, be party to that change.
Yeah, agreed.
So I'll still go back at the same statement like I went into financial thing. Culture for me is the accepted norms by the people. So if they don't accept it, that's not a culture. So whatever is our family starts with the family. If I take a very, very basic example of family. What is my family culture? It's accepted norm that 7 p.m. I should be at home. It's my culture. If I eat vegetarian food, it's my culture. So accepted norms by the people is culture. Now, if I take the topic which you started with, is a currency or not? Currency means this is an asset and advantage for us as a corporate world or not. So we talk about inclusivity, we talked about everything. So if we take example from basic things in life, that today what we are wearing and what we used to wear 100 years back in India, it is an outcome of the culture which we have adopted from various other countries. So culture brings, so when you accepted those norms, because if I could have been sitting in a dhoti, kurta or a khadi here, I could not have been accepted well here today. People will look, who is this guy? Or maybe just because it's been on the record as well, if I editing like maybe a tika and a Jai Shri Ram thing kind of thing, and I'll be considered as disciple of some political party, right? But it was there earlier. It was our culture, you know. But people did not mind it that time, but now we are minding it. So now the thing is, and this is one of the learnings I did it in last 8 to 10 years of my this thing, and I've been very blessed to kind of interacting with multiple cultures. Before this, I was like introduced, so mainly because we work with US and UK and Europe culture, right? Most of us, and maybe a little bit of APAC like Singapore and all. But I was blessed to kind of interact with people in Middle East, North Africa, countries like Egypt, Lebanon, so or Saudi Arabia, right, and Kenya, Nigeria, kind of those countries, and then in APAC also like Vietnam or maybe more of New Zealand and Australia kind of thing. So what I inference is that basically if you, in a culture and nuances, your norms have to be open, like you have to be open if you want to make it a currency kind of thing. Do we progress with the inclusivity there or not? Yes, definitely we progress, because whatever we are there in India today, if we're not open for that inclusivity to accept those norms or accepted norms, we have to accept it. If we don't consume it properly, it will not be a currency for us. The currency will only become when we accept those norms. So we have to pick and choose what is going to work for us in the next 5 to 10 years down the line, because this is going to be a economy where if you don't accept those norms and become a part of our culture, we will not progress that much as faster as we can. And that's why the US market, which is known as one of the strongest economy in the world, why did they become the strongest? Because they were accepting those norms very well, openly. They did not have their own set norms, which they were very rigid about it. And they accepted very fast. 200 years back, 150 years back, they accepted those norms and they became the fastest economy in the world. If you want to become it, because Indian companies will go global now. And if you want to kind of have our own thing here, so my major work was in Dubai. And honestly, believe me, people never used to like to work with people who have a very Indianized way of doing that thing. Honestly, they don't like it. Because we are used to working late hours, we are used to calling up anybody anytime and directly on the mobile phones. Very, very small things. Like people, if you are on a fast, on a Ramadan time, you don't even take care of that thing. Because for us, Diwali time is also, let me call the person and take out the information. Oh, can you do have 2 minutes to talk? We might be very polite to the person. Oh, I'm sorry to disturb you at this hour, but I just wanted to have this conversation. We're not mindful about the personal timings and the corporate timings and the team timings. That norms have to come if the culture has to become a currency for us. Because if we think that we are culturally advanced or culturally very inclusive, I'm sorry, not. Because we are still working on a set mindset of the norms, which we still do. But we are learning fast, yes. We are adopting fast, yes. But the adoption rate is slow. And as per me also, that fast is slow. We need to be more inclusive if we want to be more faster in that.
So there are actually a couple of points here. So one, when we talk about CI or CQ, I don't think that the expectation is that we will become their culture, or we will probably kind of embrace their culture. The only thing we are talking about here is that we should be able to understand, appreciate and accept their culture. And I'll just give you an example. So if you sit in a meeting between an Indian and an American, they will always start with a small talk. How was your weekend? Hope you had a good sleep, etc., etc. If you start the meeting with, say, a Japanese or a Korean, they come to the point, curt, meeting starts in time, ends in time. There is nothing like a small talk, how's the weather, etc., etc. So I don't think that when we talk about cultural question, we are saying that probably we Indians or the Americans should also cut down that small talk. I think in my mind the expectation, so the way I read it is that I should be able to appreciate that I am dealing with a Japanese guy, and the way they think is that they don't want to waste time on small talk, and I should be mindful of that.
So I'll correct it a little bit here, which I little bit disagree, that ways of working and the norms are very two different things.
Okay.
When I adopt the ways of working, like you took very good example of Japanese versus an American or a European or a Finnish people. I've worked with the Finnish people. So ways of working cannot be, it can become a culture of the period of time because that becomes norms afterwards. So there is a differentiation has to be very clearly made between the ways of working and the norms. What norms, as I think Rohit was mentioning, norms will be like more of a practices, more of norms will be more of a policies, more of a as I said, in the family environment, I follow that my father or mother told me 7 p.m. you should be at home. That is a practice as my family follow. That becomes my culture because I am following it. If I am in a joint family, my son or daughter will follow that. My wife will follow this because she came from the other house. So that is the acceptability of the norm as a culture become as a family, and that's how it becomes in the organization also. It should be a practice. So ways of working has to be differentiated from the norms which we adopt for the growth. That is something like...
See, I think I'll go back to, I think probably from the kind of question that came, and you can correct us if we are going in some different direction, but I think we're getting over leveraged on country cultures to organizational cultures. Inclusivity obviously helps enable multiple people to work together, to appreciate from where the other person is coming, so that the net result of a commercial business organization, I think if we kind of look at that, is that everybody brings in their best and is able to work seamlessly, right? Now, does your culture enable that through the right systems, processes, methods, or does your culture put limitations, and people who think and work like that would still flower in that system? But what are those boundary conditions which are acceptable versus not acceptable, which people feel comfort in expressing themselves? I think that is what it's a very fluid kind of a thing.
Yes.
But in some organization, people keep talking of inclusivity, but there is a special lift for the directors, right? Now, how inclusive is that or how exclusive is that, I leave it to people to decide. But the message is very clear.
Yeah.
You've got diversity, those rainbow colored things flying all over the office, and you move and you go into the lift. No, this is the director's lift, this is your lift. Ho gaya. Right? So, what are the subtle messages that you are giving in the organization day in, day out through your behaviors as culture?
Yes.
Irrespective of what gets written on your notepad and emails and all that. And that's the smell of the place I'm talking about.
Okay.
People who are comfortable with that will fly in that environment. People who are not will have to
Will find
either
it
adjust or figure out.
Yes.
Yeah.